A flat year for tourism in the cities. Why? And what will be done to make it more attractive to see the sights in the cities? This year marks the 35th anniversary of the creation of Visit Quad Cities, the convention and tourism agency that promotes the region. And this past year has not been easy. The latest annual report showed the number of tourists fell 10% in the last year, from 6.7 million visitors to 6.1. But spending stayed about the same. So what's behind the numbers? And could the addition of the long-awaited passenger rail system funding from the Illinois legislature be part of the picture of a new energized tourism destination marketing effort? We're joined by Visit Quad Cities President and CEO, Dave Herrell. So welcome. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the invitation. Good to see you as always.
Can I start with the Illinois legislature and the passenger rail issue? This has been chugging along for more than 10 years.
Right.
Do you really feel that this is the chance that passenger rail is going to come to the Quad Cities, and do you think it's going to have that big of an impact?
Well, a couple things. I think first, from a Visit Quad Cities perspective, we're thrilled to see some progress and some momentum. I've been now in the market 7 years, and when I got here, we started, talking about, this, and I was learning all about it. So to actually see the state move in this direction, I think is a positive thing. I'm fully confident that it's going to happen, and I think just the absolute advocacy and relationship building, but also just trying to stress the importance of why this connectivity is critical, not only for the Quad Cities, but also, Chicago and other, downstate communities. I think there's a lot of value there. I do think it's going to have a positive impact in a lot of areas. Definitely, tourism. We know that is going to happen. Secondly, I think economic development speaking, it's going to be a good thing. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create, hopefully this new kind of connection point and access and accessibility into the Quad Cities. And Chicago is our #1 source market for, tourism. And so now we get another tool in the tool belt to get people here, which I think adds just a lot of value, not only to economic development, but quality of life and increased visitation and that non-resident revenue, and certainly coming from Chicago is a big benefit. So definitely excited about passenger rail. There's still work to be done, but definitely excited about the progress that's being made and a win here a couple weeks ago.
Well, I guess in a way, I think if you live in the Quad Cities, I know a lot of people who really are looking forward to the passenger rail, but to leave, they want to go to Chicago where they want to shop or visit things.
Right.
So I'm thinking more that it's a departure than it is incoming revenue.
Well, from my point of view, we would probably flip that script a little bit, because obviously it gives us a chance to get inbound, visitation from, the Chicagoland area. Again, it's our leading, source market in the clubhouse. Will there be Quad citizens that will go to Chicago? Of course. They're driving there, every day. They're going to continue to do so. But now this opportunity just provides another option, for them. Not everybody can get in the car and drive that 2 hours plus to get in there, and so having a transportation option for them to be able to use is great. So that could create opportunities for jobs. It's definitely going to create opportunities for, visitation, but both ways. I think it's a chance that we can really, hopefully galvanize more activity. And if people are leaving here to go to Chicago and experience Chicago, fantastic. It also probably gives us a collaborative opportunity to think about how we work with Choose Chicago and maybe our Chicagoland, suburban destination marketing organizations to try to maybe do some fun things in and around joint promotion to create activity in both markets too.
When you take a look at what Moline has done, when you transform the old Sears warehouse building into a hotel and a ticketing area for a passenger rail, the cities really now are poised for this. I mean, do you think that was a major benefit is that that investment was already there?
You know, I think the more that we can activate our downtowns and invest in, capital infrastructure and take some of these buildings and reimagine them, I think the private sector is doing a phenomenal job looking at really the historic character of some of the assets that we have and then putting dollars into them and then working with public sector, partners to get those projects across the goal line. It definitely adds value. It creates opportunity to think about quality of place, quality of life, and if you've got an active downtown, one that's thriving, that's vibrant, well, that's good for residents. It's certainly good for the visitor economy and tourism, but it's also great for quality of life. You want people to have options from a livability perspective across all demographic lines. I think sometimes people think, oh, the only people that live downtown are maybe like a younger demographic, and that's just not true. So having a diverse portfolio of those options is a good thing.
Well, and I'm thinking when I arrived here 30 years ago, downtown Moline, the Mark had just recently opened. There was empty Deere warehouses in the area where the pavilion is right now. Rock Island had the district, the Arts and Entertainment District, which had some bars that were just starting. Downtown Davenport really wasn't doing much, and Bettendorf was a bedroom community. You take a look now at the development that's just completed in Rock Island, what's happening with the I-74 bridge being removed in downtown Moline. The fact that we're seeing sparks, several of them in downtown East Moline, and then all that's going on, of course, on the Iowa side in Davenport and Davenport and Bettendorf. This is a major transformation for the heart of the cities.
It really is, and I think sometimes people need to recognize that. I mean, that there is progress and there is momentum being made in every single community in the Quad Cities, and we're proud to see those results. Sometimes it takes a little time. You get a vision, you get a little civic will. But I definitely feel like these downtowns are coming more alive, and they're a key part of like the product experience for visitors. When they come here, they want walkability, they want destination assets that are right there. They want that connectivity to maybe a hotel property, restaurants, attractions, nightlife, all of these things. And so it's exciting to see these things come online. And like you said, like look at what's happening in East Moline, downtown Rock Island with the revitalization of that area. Moline, has got some exciting plans on the horizon. And then downtown Davenport, just how that has become more and more alive. The Main Street Landing project and that major, riverfront redevelopment, project, Bettendorf, and the things that they've got in the hopper, but also like communities like LeClaire. Port Byron. You look at the entire swath of the Quad Cities region, and there is investment that is happening. It's not just public sector investment; it's private sector folks coming together to create these neighborhoods. And we're kind of like the boroughs of New York. We love that character, we love that diversity in place, and to have all of these little places, right? How they're tethered and that tapestry really provides us a competitive chance when we're trying to think through how we market, how we promote, how we sell the Quad Cities, but that downtown vibrancy is critical to what we do.
Well, and as you know, over the last particularly 5 years, there's been an emphasis by the Chamber of Commerce to attract families here that want to work here, but make this a vibrant place to live, almost make it more hip and more interesting.
Right.
How is that process going, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's, one, kudos to our partners at the Quad Cities Chamber, Grow Quad Cities, Peter Tokar and their team. I think they've got a bold vision for the future, and we're blessed to be their partner. We always try to remind people that everything starts with a visit. So we got to get people here first so they can kick the tires, so they can experience the Quad Cities and what we have to offer. So tourism is a huge cog in the wheel in the broader economic development picture, but you're never going to move to a community, take that first job, maybe go to school, unless you visit first. So when people come here, that first impression is vitally important. So as we think about our pillars, tourism development, destination marketing, visitor experience, all of those things have to be seamless, but they are connected to livability. They are connected to talent attraction and talent retention. And the more that we can work together as kind of like a team in this private public sector concept, the better off we're going to be and the more competitively positioned we're going to be as a region, because it is a hyper competitive space. We're competing with communities all around the United States for increased visitation and talent retention, all of these kind of things. And so how we take our package and then deploy that to the world is kind of where Visit Quad Cities needs to be in our lane, and bringing all of our stakeholders and partners together to make sure we realize those goals.
You came out with the latest report as far as the health of tourism in the Quad Cities for the past year. And you reported that tourism visits dropped from 6.7 million to 6.1 million. That's a 10% drop. How concerned are you about something like that, even though revenue stayed relatively flat?
Well, I think it's a little nuanced, because even though the visits, those trips are down a little bit, and again, that's all geolocation, business intelligence. So it's somebody coming in our market. It doesn't necessarily mean an overnight stay. It could literally be like a day trip. And if they're using their cell phone and connecting on an app, that's how we capture that data. Is that down? Yes. But what was up was the amount of visitor days in total, 13.9 million visitor days, and average length of stay was 2.3, which actually increases in those two categories. However, though, I am concerned about the overall health of our visitor economy. So in total, 1.38 billion, a significant amount of tax revenue generated at the local level and in both states, but it is flat. And that's why we need to constantly remind everybody, whether that's the public sector, partners that we have and our key investors, and the private sector, that we need that non-resident revenue in the Quad Cities, because that non-resident revenue is not just hotel motel tax, that transient occupancy tax. It's sales tax, and it's gaming revenue, and it's food and beverage, and it's gas, and it's all of these things that kind of make up the overall visitor economy. So holding serve at that 1.3 plus billion is a good thing. I'm not going to capture it as a win, but hopefully what it is, it's a catalyst to remind people that we have to do more, and we need inbound visitation. Everybody wants to see our population grow, and currently it's stagnant. And so sounding that alarm, to be thinking about how are we going to market ourselves more robustly so that we can bring people in, and once they're here, they are going to spend those dollars in our regional economy, and we need them to do that, and do that a lot.
Now, the fact that people, according to the latest research, are staying for a longer period of time is obviously good news. But does that 10% drop concern you?
It really doesn't, Jim, because I think there's so many variables that go into that, and in our world, there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? And sometimes people might say, "Oh, did you not bring as many meetings, conventions, sporting events?" Well, that's part of it, but business travel, that Monday through Thursday, is vitally important. So that's why we need companies like the John Deeres of the world and IMEG. We need the Rock Island Arsenal, all of our major employers to constantly be reminded that we want that inbound traffic. Our hospitality industry needs to be positioned. They need to thrive. And when you think about tourism and travel, you can't just think of it in the context of Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You really need to be thinking Monday through Thursday as well. So that business travel is just as crucial as anything that we do, whether it's group travel, whether it's leisure travel. We need to be firing off all cylinders to drive that performance even higher than what it was last year.
One of the big draws of the Quad Cities, of course, were the 3 casino boats, and we're seeing that more competitive. As you were pointing out, there's new casino boats in Illinois popping up. You've got the new one in Cedar Rapids that's being developed and should be open by the end of next year. Does that have an impact that we're not seeing that incoming dollars into the Quad Cities as much because of the spread of gambling outside?
I think all of these things are tethered together, right? I think it's a function of what destination assets you have. I think it's got broader ripple effects in terms of just the economy, consumer confidence, all of these things. I think our casinos are thriving. Am I concerned about competitive threats? Yes. And I think that just gives us a chance to be thinking about, with our gaming industry partners, how do we elevate that, marketing even more? What are we doing on the sales side to try to drive, more, activity? Because we want them to be successful, because those dollars that we're bringing in are being reinvested, and particularly, in Iowa with the QSOs, which are really, reinvesting those dollars into nonprofit organizations. So we need to make sure we're growing those and driving that base, even more. But I feel like we're poised to do more in that arena, but we just need to continually, focus on what's our marketing, what's our advertising. We cannot be status quo because other communities are competing against us, and that's why this level of investment is critical.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. Is that what you have is a very hyper-competitive environment. I mean, you're
Right.
competing against Des Moines, you're St. Louis.
Yeah.
You go to the north.
Madison, Milwaukee, you name it.
And
Yeah.
so you got to find your own niche, or do you have to try to be more broad?
Well, I think for us, I mean, we've got to, one, we know who we are. Two, we are a drive-to, destination. We want to continually focus on things like airlift and making sure that we're prioritizing that. But it's this relationship in these other source markets. Obviously Chicago is number one. Des Moines, the corridor, right? That entire area, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Dubuque, Waterloo. Like, what is our relationship, with them? Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Southern Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, Omaha. We're seeing huge growth in Indiana, from Indianapolis into the western, part of the state. So we need to continue to invest resources in marketing within that Midwest, profile. Will we be doing media buying and things in Miami and Seattle and Los Angeles? No, that we don't have the resources to be able to do that. But that super regional, profile. Again, there's 37 million people that live within 6-hour radius points of the Quad Cities. How are we connected to that and this drive to mentality to try to get them here so that they're spending dollars in our market?
I'm surprised you mentioned Indianapolis and Indiana. What's driving that?
I think it's a lot of things. I think one, we're doing more on the marketing side, and so I think we're understanding where these source markets are, and if we're seeing some upward trends in terms of activity, then we can maybe invest some resources. We've got a whole new marketing approach at Visit Quad Cities. We're not necessarily capturing things in campaigns per se. We are literally advertising and marketing the QC 365 days out of the year. So paid media, earned media, own media strategies to make sure that we're top of mind and we're getting that messaging out. But sometimes we do shift. If we see maybe some growth in a market like Indianapolis or Western Indiana, we're like, okay, maybe that's something that we need to double down on more and invest some resources to see if we can get even more traction, and that's what we're going to do.
You have also really focused on athletics and sports tourism, which is growing amazingly quickly. You take a look at the TBK complex that's out in Bettendorf, which has transformed that interchange in ways I think people were expecting, but we're still pleasantly surprised. But you also see like the Extreme Arena in Coralville that's grabbing new events because it's shiny and new. And how tough is that market right now? And how much should the Quad Cities be banking on the sports entertainment aspect of tourism?
Well, from our perspective, sports tourism and the recruitment of sporting events is about 56% of our group business. So if you look at meetings, conventions, group tours, conferences, sporting events make up 56% of it. And
that is huge.
Yeah, so it is a huge percentage of what we do, and we need to continue to do more in that arena. Now, we are limited in resources. There's only so much that we can do in terms of like investing and trying to acquire events, because it takes direct investment to be able to bring things here. Facilities. You mentioned TBK Bank Sports Complex. Just the vision that Doug Kratz and his team have had in that venue, but also the collaboration with the city of Bettendorf and then our organization to think through like how are we optimizing that venue. But without Doug's private investment, none of that happens. And so incredibly grateful for Doug and what he's done. But that facility has been an economic development engine for the entire Quad Cities region. If people are activating, TBK Bank Sports Complex on a weekend, I can virtually guarantee you they could be staying in Rock Island or East Moline or Moline, so it's got a broader, value to the region. The Vibrant Arena, continues to do amazing things. We're very fortunate that we're going to host the 2028 D3 Wrestling Championships at Vibrant, Arena, and we've got Missouri Valley Women's Basketball Tournament coming back in 2027. We had the Hawks here for a game, last November. We've got to continually push on activating these venues, but sports tourism is a huge part of it. It is definitely more and more competitive. Sometimes we might have had 5 to 7 competitors in terms of going after a piece of business. Now it could be 12 to 14, okay? And there's more and more venues and facilities popping up in the Midwest. Shields has a huge investment in Springfield, Illinois. Bradley, Illinois has a new complex. West Des Moines is adding. Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of these places are doing more on the facility side, and we need to continually push that envelope over the long haul to make sure that we're competitive and relevant within the sports tourism space of the future.
Well, and you look at the homegrown events. I mean, if you look at the John Deere Classics,
Right.
when you look at Big 7, sometimes Ragbri comes here. I mean, the Quad Cities already has some valuable assets that other communities must just look at, and they're not going to leave, but other communities must look at it with awe.
Well, I think they do, but I think the important thing is we got to do everything in our power as a community to make sure they don't leave. So the John Deere Classic is such a treasure for our community, and it's not a given that it's going to be here for the next 30 years, but we got to make sure we're doing everything in our power to retain an event like that, because the economic development impact that it makes is so wide sweeping, and just through Birdies for Charity and the value that it provides those nonprofits. And so events like that, events like the BICS, events like our TBK Bank marathon that happens, that's such a huge value prop in terms of like programming our community. But we're also doing things like we're hosting the women's NJCAA golf regional championship here in April. National championship, it's going to be a phenomenal event, for us. We've got NAIA, golf again. We're going to be hosting the NCAA, women's golf regional championship in 2028. So these things and how we program and diversify our portfolio. In May of 26, we're hosting an event called SafeCon, which is essentially like the Final Four for collegiate pilots. It's going to be a 3-week, event for the Quad Cities and the students that are going to be participating in that event. We've got to continue to push the envelope and acquire these events and bring in that group business, because it's just vitally important to our regional economy.
How important because making the Quad Cities a destination sometimes means making it a hip place to be.
Yeah.
And you look at alternating currents, which it started as River Roots, has kind of become the South by Southwest-esque type of event. How important are events like that to not only bring in tourists, but also, once again, I go back to tourists at home and make this a hip place to live?
Well, I think if you look at just destination programming, which is connected to our destination vision, our tourism master plan, like that programming is vitally important to quality of life, vibrancy, getting your locals activated in your community, but those are also products. And how do we take those products and make sure that people are emotionally connecting with them? You mentioned alternating currents, huge opportunity for our region. Kyle Carter and his team at Downtown Davenport Partnership just do a phenomenal job in bringing that event to life. And we're proud to be their partner in shaping that story so that we can bring in, visitors and experience that. I mean, it's such a unique event, blending all of this creative energy. It's why we're sort of pushing this creative capital in the Midwest message out, because we do feel this sense of place as it relates to our creative vibrancy. And the more that Visit Quad Cities can share that story, but also market it and promote it, it's good for visitation. It's definitely good for tourism, but it's also good for residents and the people that live here.
Visit Quad Cities is marking 35 years right now. You think of 40 years ago, and it was a splintered Quad Cities. You literally, of course, had the river and the 2 states. You had each community with its own kind of tourism or chamber of commerce even. In the last 35 years, is it the Quad Cities gets it now? You've got to have a regional approach. You've got to talk with one voice. You've got to come together.
Well, I think from our vantage point, we're always trying to remind our community stakeholders, public sector, private sector, residents. Residents are our number one customer. We always want to remind people of that. People think because you're in the tourism space, your number one customer is the visitor, but really it's the locals. When visitors come here, they do not know boundaries or borders, and they don't care. And so we need Illinois and Iowa to thrive together within the QC, because our visitor economy is dependent on that. The product development, space. What's good for Rock Island is good for Davenport, and what's good for Bettendorf is good for Moline, and what's good for East Moline is good for, LeClaire, and so on and so on. And so trying to constantly remind people of that. Sometimes we do have a tendency to get in our own way. And that's natural. That's not just necessarily like the Quad Cities. Other communities experience that. But what we want to remind people is this. We are better positioned as a region, okay? People emotionally connect to the Quad Cities, brand. We got a great story to tell. We've got an amazing product to package. And the more that we can get these folks connected to what we have to offer, the better off we're going to be. But doing that as a regional approach is the only way that makes the best sense for us to be competitively positioned. But again, taking all of what we've got from all of our communities and blending that into one saleable message is really the role of Visit Quad Cities, and we're going to continue to reinforce that to create more value for our regional economy and the people that depend on us every day. Travel and tourism is essential. Okay, we're supporting over 9,000 jobs, okay? That non-resident revenue, and the more that we bring in, is getting reinvested into our quality of life. And so we can't have a destination marketing organization in a community that is status quo. We've got to continue to push. We've got to continue to bring more people here, and that's going to be our mission and our focus for the long term.
Our thanks to Visit Quad Cities President and CEO Dave Herrell. And speaking of Visit Quad Cities, here's their ideas to get you out and about to see what's going on in the cities right now.
Check out the things to do this week in the Quad Cities. Pick up a passport at a participating business and receive a stamp with each purchase. Turn your passport in for a chance to win prizes. Then, Santa Claus the Musical is making its way to the Circa 21 Dinner Playhouse. It's the perfect show for the whole family. Next, see the Grinch, an elf, Frosty the Snowman, a reindeer, and Santa during Christmas in the Village. Then enjoy train rides, shopping, Santa, and lots of holiday cheer in downtown Rock Island all afternoon long. Finally, take a step back in time to experience an 1800s Christmas. Enjoy beautiful decorations and amazing musical performances. For more events like these, check out our events calendar at visitquadcities.com.
America declared its independence in 1776, and next year marks the 250th anniversary of that moment that changed the world. But it's the people who have changed this nation, and we're highlighting those who have done just the same here in the cities. We call it Civic Sparks. Bethany for Women and Families has been a safety net for people through a variety of services. It's led by Laura Ingram, its president and CEO. And we asked Laura, what's your Civic Spark?
Because I believe that service to others is actually what creates happiness. And I find that looking outward is what makes me feel better. It's what makes my family more stable. It's what makes my neighbors happier. So I love just to focus on service to others in general. And so I chose to study social work in school as a way to do that, and always knew that I was going to spend my life thinking about other people as much as I could.
Laura Ingram, CEO for Bethany for Women and Children, with her Civic Spark. We're going on a hiatus for the next month as Western Illinois University makes changes to its Quad City campus. We're on the move with our offices and studios to change over the coming weeks, so we hope to be back with you after the holidays. So until then, on the air, on the radio, on the web, on your mobile device, and streaming on your computer, thank you for taking some time to join us as we talk about the issues on the cities.